And then I am going to do this.
Hey, Dragana. You got that on record, didn't you?
How are you?
Yeah.
Good. Good to see you. You look well?
Yeah, thanks. Everybody keeping well? Staying safe and healthy?
Our best, I think.
Here's the thing. Okay.
That is working now. So welcome everyone. This is the, we'll call it the inaugural technical group, Passos Canada Social. My name is Chris Hill. I am, what am I? I'm acting a bit more. So a lot of you guys know me already. I'm a board member for Passos Canada. And in the last little while, I've been asked to take on a bit more of an active role. So I am now helping out with some of the financial stuff and also the socials, as we're a little lighter in the staffing department. And hopefully that will change the next little bit. But for now you got me. So we know this presentation was planned a little while back. We had to delay it because of COVID, but we're quite excited to have the speakers we have and present them. And I think it actually does lend itself really well for this new virtual environment. So today, this is the technical group. It's an eco-friendly on our construction sites. It is presented by our main sponsor, SIGA, and it is also in collaboration with ZebX that we are working with on a number of items. I am going to hand this off quite quick. Oh, sorry, no. First, I got to do virtual housekeeping. During the presentation, please keep your mic on mute. To speak, you'll obviously have to unmute it. A good Zoom trick is your spacebar does unmute you if you just need to say something quickly. We did try to keep this group. I think we had 39 registered, so we don't have a huge number, and that was kind of our goal, is to bring it back to Vancouver in our local group that we all know each other really well. If you do have questions, feel free to use the chat function, and we will be recording this presentation, and I hope to make it available if the recording works. This presentation was put together previous to me, but I got asked to host it. So I'm going to introduce your moderator now. George Benson is the point person on the Vancouver Economic Commission's Green Economy team, supporting business working with the built environment in their transition to a zero carbon economy. I'm now going to stop my share and hand this over to George. Everyone, welcome George.
All right, thank you so much. Nice to see lots of familiar faces here and actually a whole bunch of new ones. So really grateful for all of you for taking the time today. My job here, I guess, is to kind of kick us off and kind of conceptualize a little bit about why we should bother, why we should care. I thought about calling this "Why Give a Shit," but that seemed like maybe a little edgy for this audience. But you know, that was in my heart. If you're following along with me, I'm going to just quickly, I think, contextualize a little bit of the issue we're talking about here, and then I'm going to hand it over to our very, very knowledgeable speakers who are going to dive into the details of this really interesting space. So I call this, you know, why bother emissions and materials in buildings? There's a bunch of ways, you know, we talk about eco-friendly on site. I think there's a bunch of ways we can slice and dice this, but emissions and materials in buildings seemed kind of the broadest category to conceptualize this through. Just a little bit quickly on the VEC. The VEC, Vancouver Economic Commission, is the City of Vancouver's economic development agency. We work to build a prosperous, inclusive, and resilient economy for Vancouver, its businesses, and its citizens. And how we do that is really kind of three streams. We do a lot of research, which you'll hear a little bit about. We do programming, which is everything from one-to-one business coaching all the way up to mentorship, fundraising, training, industry association engagement, you name it, we kind of do it. And then finally, we do a lot of advocacy and working with policymakers to help build better policies to grow what we hope will be a sustainable and resilient economy. And I'm happy to chat with you guys more about that in the questions as we go forward. I kept trying to think about this presentation in terms of why. Who cares? Why bother? Why does the life cycle of a building matter? And it really kind of came down on three key areas or issues that should motivate us to really get involved in this space. The first is greenhouse gas emissions. No surprise to any of you, I think. This is a great piece of great visualization from Zizzo's strategy that is for the Toronto Atmosphere Fund a few years ago. All of us know, I think, that the emissions of a building don't start when you turn the key and you walk inside and you have occupancy, and they certainly don't end when you say, thanks for all your work, we're going to start taking you down. There's a whole supply chain of emissions, the so-called embodied carbon of a building, that extends all the way to the point at which we extract the natural resources that make that building and go to the end of, well, do we throw those resources or those materials in a landfill, or are they otherwise accounted for in some sort of other, are they used in some other aspect of the economy or our society? And to put that, put that more in focus, the Architecture 2030, you may have seen this graph from the Embodied Carbon Network and others, but they found that annually embodied carbon is responsible for about 11% of global greenhouse gas emissions and 28% of the global building sector emissions. Now, that's only for new buildings, right? If we think about the full scope of global waste emissions, and I think you'll hear more from Faisal from the City of Vancouver about that, it's a non-negligible part, right? It's not the same as stationary emissions or the same as transportation emissions, for example, but it's meaningful and something we need to be accounting for in our emissions reduction strategies going forward. The second piece is, of course, the materials themselves. We extract a phenomenal amount of materials from this planet, and as cities and other organizations start to think about what a so-called one planet economy looks like, living within the natural boundaries of our geophysical systems, the amount of materials we use just writ large really matters. So Circle Economy out of Amsterdam does their annual circularity gap report, and this year they found that 28.7 billion, with a B, tons, metric tons of materials are extracted from the planet every year for construction and infrastructure. That's just an astounding amount of material, right? That's the single largest material usage by any sector in the world. And that is growing over time. So we have a clear imperative to reduce the amount of these materials that we're using if we intend to meet our emissions. If we intend to meet a variety of our social and environmental goals. The final reason we should care is that we have an economy that's significantly implicated in construction in our buildings. And obviously this is why something like the Commission gets involved. I always like to refer to the VEC's work in the green job space. Since 2010, we've been tracking the number of green jobs in Vancouver. And while we've seen that number grow 35% between 2010 and 2016, that's a rate far greater than pretty much any other sector, pretty much outside of tech in the city. Green buildings have always been one of the single largest, if now the largest, pillars of that green economy. We have lots of folks in clean tech. We're a global clean tech player, but green buildings, job for job, are still one of the largest sectors. And we expect that trend to continue, particularly as we adopt more strenuous, rigorous green building policies moving forward. So there's a clear economic imperative here when we're talking about our built environment. I'm just going to close with a few thoughts here that sort of maybe pull all this together, which is the first of which being that we're in a climate emergency, and we know that the city has set a goal and our region has set a goal of being carbon neutral by 2050. That's laid down in a number of different policies, but it's very clear that that's where we are headed. The second one is that as a city, we know we want to be zero waste by 2040. And again, many of you are familiar with the ins and outs of how we're going to tackle that goal. And so from those two policies, it's clear that circularity can and should be, from the Commission's point of view, certainly, an economic policy. This is a way to stimulate and transform our economy over time. And we take it really seriously that we have great innovators in this room who we want to understand the guts of what you're doing and then start to pull that up to a more systemic level. We want to see these kind of practices adopted widespread. And just to give you a sense of how that happens, economic policy, we have a case study, and it's called the BC Energy Step Code and the Vancouver Zero Emission Building Plan. We did a study last year where we looked at those policies in the Metro Vancouver context, and we found that those regulations were driving the creation of an economy. $3.3 billion in demand generated just by those two policies in the metro region, and only for 6 different types of products. If you start to get into the new types of labor, the new types of logistics, building information modeling, all of those various back-end services, all of those are being driven by these policies. We are building new markets. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what kind of markets do we want to build? And I think we're going to hear a little bit more about what those can look like. So there's a clear economic reason, and we want to see this work move forward. I'm going to leave you with just one piece of some resources we have. We have a tool that you can use, shift.opentech.eco, which is a website. This gives you an online tool to play with some of that step code data. Highly recommend you check it out. Worked with Open Technologies, a great Vancouver firm on this. And then we have a number of reports. We have, we were in Europe last year doing a bunch of touring. Actually, we met with buildings as materials banks, talked with a number of mass timber suppliers and a number of other interesting companies, organizations, learning what we can bring from Europe back to Vancouver. We have our forecast from 2019 that we're actually working on updating right now. And we have our 2018 State of the Green Economy report. So lots of great details there. I'll leave the sales pitch there. You can reach out to me here. And my job now is to just sit back and watch all the great brain trust here that's going to move forward. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And I am going to turn it over to Cassidy.
Hi. It's funny, I've learned through all of our self-isolating that I get far more nervous for presentations that are happening via the internet than I do for presentations that are in person, which is not what I would have expected. So I'm really happy to be here speaking with all of you today. Thank you, Chris, for organizing and George for moderating. Pretty much everyone in this call is someone that I've wanted a chance to collaborate with for a really long time. So I'm actually very excited about this session. Just gonna set up my screen share here for all of you so you can see what I'm seeing. There we go, that's working for everyone. Good. So yeah, so my name's Cassidy Vanderas. I'm the Communications and Marketing Manager for Nickel Brothers. So we're a structural moving company. We work throughout the Pacific Northwest, and industrially we work globally, but I'm here to talk about our residential division today. So we're going to be talking a little bit about home recycling and home relocation and how that compares with deconstruction and demolition, and also how it fits into the circular economy. I'm going to start by just introducing you all to Nickel Brothers, because I think I know a couple of you, but probably not all of you are completely familiar with us. So Nickel Brothers has been around since 1956. We were a family-run business then. We're a family-run business now. We have actually performed more barge moves of homes and structures than any other structural mover in the Pacific Northwest, and we are currently the largest unsubsidized recycler in the country. So we move between 150 and 300 homes every year, which diverts about 21,000 tons of waste from landfills annually and provides affordable housing for hundreds of families every year, which is awesome. So when we talk about home recycling, there's a few different options that you can go with. There's raising, which is essentially if someone wanted to build an addition onto their house, rather than doing that, they could actually raise the home, which saves some of your outdoor footprint. It's a great option for smaller lots. It's also just a great option for families who want to be able to preserve some of that outdoor space and keep more of a yard for their kids to play in. We found it's being really popular in Vancouver so that people can develop secondary suites. We also have on-site relocation. So that would be, for instance, say you have a client who has a larger piece of property with an older home, it's a bit smaller, rather than demolishing that home when you're subdividing it to make room for other buildings, we would potentially lift that home up and then just slide it back to another corner. It could become a coach house or some form of secondary dwelling within that subdivision. And then finally, home removal, which is what I'm mostly going to be focusing on today, which is where the home is lifted and moved right off the property rather than being demolished. It stays intact, and it can become an affordable housing option for another family. So for the main thing that we've noticed in Vancouver is we have some really, really amazing developers and builders and public service workers who are working really hard to make our development industry more environmentally friendly. But there still seems to be often a culture of planning to build rather than planning to waste. And those things really do need to be connected. You can't plan to build without planning and putting the same infrastructure in place for what you're going to do with the waste materials that come from that process. So just kind of for reference, an average 1,600 square foot house weighs 35 to 55 tons. and 40% of that house weight is wood products. You know, sorry, I just always find it really impactful that 40% of that home is coming from our resources and could be reused. And by throwing those away, we're now having to cut down more trees. And I just think people aren't always aware of the actual amount that is in each of these homes that's being torn down. You know, like 3,000 homes were demolished in Metro Vancouver in 2018. So when you think about the amount of wood there that was just, you know, kind of torn up and wasted, it's a lot of clean wood. Over 60% of those homes were pre-1940s homes, so they were built using, you know, old growth wood rather than the new growth wood that we have now. And those 3,000 homes created 165,000 tons of solid waste in our landfills. 33% of our landfill waste currently is demolition waste. So 235 of those were classified as character homes. So some of those materials would have had to be recycled based on the municipal bylaws. One thing I find interesting is that despite all of the programs in place to save character homes and older homes, only 27 of those homes were actually retained through city-backed incentive programs. So 27 of 235, which tells me that despite all of the progress we're making and all the efforts people are making, there really is still a very long way to go in being able to reuse these materials effectively. So about 1/3 of those homes were actually suitable for recycling or relocation, but either we didn't get a call to recycle or relocate them, or we were brought into the process too late, which is something that I'll talk about a little bit throughout today. But if we had received the call to relocate these homes, we could have diverted 97,500 tons of waste from the landfills within 1 year, which includes 22,000 tons of clean wood. And that equates to 41,800 trees that wouldn't have needed to be cut down for 1 year. So we find that a lot of homes nowadays are being deconstructed, which can be a really, really great option. But I think it's always important to look at the recycling hierarchy, which kind of tells us that reuse generally should come before recycling. So when you look at a deconstruction project, deconstruction on average only reuses 20% of the materials that they're able to salvage. The others are recycled by being used for fill or, you know, other processes like that. So again, we really try to promote repurposing and reuse first and recycling last. And, you know, sometimes there are situations where we can do both. For instance, in Vancouver, we have trolley lines. So if it's a 2-story home, we often can't take both stories due to the height restrictions. So we for instance, we work with unbuilders quite often where we'll move, you know, the top half of the home and they'll come in and deconstruct the bottom half. So it's a really great collaboration within our industry to try to save as many of these materials as possible. So just as an example, to kind of give you a comparison between deconstruction, demolition, and home recycling, this is a home that was in Vancouver. We received a call about it in 2018, and it needed to be moved by the city of Vancouver to actually create park space. It was in the way of where they kind of planned out their green space initiative. So that home ended up being moved to New West, and it is a rental property now. So with that home being recycled, the total cost to recycle that home was about $8,000, and we were able to divert 93 tons of wood or of construction waste from the landfill throughout that home's life cycle as well. By being able to extend the lifespan of that home, we've saved roughly 200 trees throughout the lifespan of that home, which compared to deconstruction, it would have been around $29,000 to deconstruct that home, which would have saved 90.21 tons of diverted waste through reuse and recycling. And then green demolition, because the thing you have to keep in mind too is with deconstruction and green demo, you also need to do all of your hazmat abatement. Whereas with home recycling, that quite often isn't necessary because we don't disturb the materials in the same way as kind of lifting them up and taking them out does. So for green demolition, your cost would have been around $33,000, and you'd only have diverted around 69.75 tons of waste from the landfill. So home recycling compares quite well when you think of cost and amount of waste diverted. Where we tend to get hung up is timeline. So for instance, you can generally book you know, a demolition contractor within a few days. They can be on site, they can tear the house down. Whereas for us, once the permits are in place and the site is prepped, we can physically move that home within about 5 days. But we also need the time to market it to another family or to an affordable housing organization. And we need the time to line up permits on either end because it's leaving one property to another. So we generally need about 3 months to 1 year of notice of removal. So we generally ask people to let us know as soon as they know that that home is going to need to be removed from that spot. But a lot of people don't let us know until their permits are approved. And that makes the timeline really tight, whereas in reality, we could have been marketing that building that whole time. So going back to the hazmat abatement, we quite often get contractors who just don't believe that you don't need the hazmat abatement with recycling. And the reality is 50% of the homes that we deal with contain hazmat materials. We've been doing this for 60 years. We have an in-house engineering team that specially designs all of our equipment to minimize the disruption of those materials. So it's really not a huge drawback for us. You know, even if you do have an older home that you think has hazardous materials in it, we will happily come and look at that home and take it on if we can find a suitable place for it. So we hear a lot of talk about the circular economy lately, especially from the Ministry of Environment. That's kind of one of their keywords right now. So home recycling is very much a circular economy solution because it does create affordable housing as well. So the average cost to build new in BC is about $200 to $500 per square foot, whereas the average cost to have a recycled home delivered and installed is about $75 to $120 per square foot. And that includes building a basement underneath it if you wanted another floor. So currently we find a lot of our homes are actually being received into Washington State. We have a few different affordable housing organizations that we partner with there. So you can see this particular development was 12 homes that we moved into the San Juan Islands, and we have another affordable housing development with that same organization coming up. So a lot of these homes, as I said, like they contain materials that we can't get anymore. So we're not just looking at the value of the environmental impact that we can save through these homes. We're not just looking at the affordability. It's also the fact that these homes in a lot of cases are, I don't want to say this to offend anyone, but a lot of them are in a lot of ways just more structurally sound than the homes that we're building now. They're incredibly solid, and you know, they've kind of been time tested, and the materials in them that we're at risk of just throwing away are literally things that don't exist anymore. So this is just another shot of that particular housing development. So that one, we've moved 26 homes in the past 5 years for this particular affordable housing organization. And we're hoping to partner with a few more in the Lower Mainland. But Washington definitely seems to be a little bit more involved with us at this point in time. This is actually an apartment building that we moved into Port Townsend because they had a huge housing crisis. And they were looking for a way to create lots of units in kind of without having a lot of property still available. So we were able to source an actual apartment building for them to create multiple units in the available space that they had. So a lot of people they're worried about calling us about certain homes because they think they're going to be too small or too old or too tall. But we really do take a huge variety of homes. So this home was actually one that was used in the flash. It is on Cambie Street in Vancouver, and it is currently at risk of being demolished for a new development. So that one, we would be able to move to someone else's property for about $120 per square foot. This is the Delestre Dream Home, unlike the Cambie house, which is you know, a bit older, more of a heritage house. This one is only 10 years old. So this is where I'm coming from when I say we get such a variety of homes. It's crazy to me that we would have so many newer homes that are at risk of being demolished. but you know, it's on a huge lot and it's just not the style that people want. So that one is also currently at risk of being demolished. You know, 6 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms. Yeah. This is the Malaview Rancher. So this is an example of a smaller home that we have. Again, it's a rancher. This one would be a great little second dwelling home if you have a larger property, or even potentially a vacation home on the Sunshine Coast or something like that. And this one's only $70 per square foot. The Phinney Ridge Charmer, again, built in 1905. It isn't on the Heritage Registry, so it can be demolished if nobody buys it. And this is actually a home that we have been marketing as an office building because all of the rooms are separated, and it just kind of has that kind of layout, whereas most people in a house right now, they want more open concept. So that's how we've been marketing this one. So there's a lot of different options, and we actually have people looking for office buildings. So that's always something that we can kind of use as an avenue to market the homes as well. Pratt Coach House, I kind of threw this one in because I feel like people just often, they think that the houses and the teardowns that they have aren't going to be worthwhile. But you know, it's 670 square foot. This home is a perfect second dwelling for someone, and it can easily be fixed up into a nice little rental. And despite the fact that it needs some upgrades, the bones are there. It's very solidly built. It has very good materials. So there's no reason for it to not be used for, you know, another 50, 100 years, depending on how well people take care of it. And finally, we have the Harbor Mansion, which this was moved out of Gig Harbor in Washington. So it's between 7,000 and 8,000 square feet. And we were able to move it in one piece. So this home is fully custom. It has custom appliances. It has a custom wine cellar, has a spiral staircase. It has copper gutters, and it's crazy. This house is crazy. But the challenge we have with it is it can only be barged because it's so large. It needs to be moved by water. So we need a property that is at least 100-foot wide and low bank waterfront for it to go on. But just to give you an idea, like this home can be moved for $112 a square foot, and it has been appraised without property, just the home on its own, at $3.2 million. So it's a really, really great investment. And we actually have moved we move mansions on a fairly regular basis. I wouldn't say they're super frequent, but you know, it's just one of those things that would be such a great investment for the right person. So anyway, yeah, so just kind of as a part of the circular economy, you know, it's a really great option and an affordable option, both on the developer standpoint and on the receiving end. It's a great way to create new housing for people while limiting our resource use and kind of maintaining the integrity of those materials that we just can't get anymore. So if anybody's interested in recycling a home ever, if you have a project that you think might be appropriate, again, that 3 months to 1 year notice of removal is so important. And it really is one of those things where, you know, even if you don't have your permits in place, even if, you know, not everything's confirmed, if you know that that house has to leave, just let us know, because we have so many people looking for housing that we literally don't have enough houses to keep up with them. So, you know, the more notice that we can have to match someone to that home is always better. Once the receiving site is prepped and all of the permits are in place on both ends, we can generally move the home within about 5 days. We do have some inspections required. That hazmat report is required, though generally the abatement isn't very extensive. We just kind of need the abatement in the areas that we're working in. And in terms of structural soundness and suitability for removal, we take care of all of that, along with all of your road move permits and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hopefully, you know, collaborating with some of you and just being able to hopefully teach you something about home recycling as an option, because I think it really is something that was far more common 10 years ago, and it's almost as though as we've gotten more focused on the environment, it's gotten forgotten a little bit with all of our new technologies and everything. And I think it's something that would be really valuable for us to bring back. So that is my presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cassidy.
Figure out how to stop sharing the screen now.
I'm going to suggest, I think I saw we had one question question from Arya. If you want to add any more color to that one, Cassidy, I'll just offer that to you.
Sure.
The question was, do you guys lift the house for adding a basement under as well?
Yeah. So what we would generally do, like if the home was moved and you wanted to put a basement under it, is we move the house to the lot and then we jack it up and you build the foundation under it. So, and then once the foundation's built, we just lower it on. So you can pretty much make it any height you want. We even have homes where they've added 2 floors. So we've raised it from the bottom and they've added a basement. And then we've also raised the second floor as well. So you end up with like a new floor here, old floor here, new floor here, old floor here. So there's a lot of different options that we can kind of make work for you depending on what you want the final project to look like.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do we have any other quick questions for Cassidy here? Or otherwise, I think we'll have a richer discussion towards the end. But if you just have a quick, like, before I forget, I wanted to ask you X. Now's your chance. Going once, going twice. Okay, on to the next. Let's go now to sea to sky removal. I'm not sure who's going to speak from there. Are you guys both going to, tag team this?
We're on mute.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to all see your faces and seeing this community gather online today. First of all, we really love to thank Passive House Canada for inviting us here to speak about something that we're very passionate about. Thank you, Cassie and Nickel Brothers. You guys are true landfill diversion heroes. Thank you so much for sharing your impactful work and the work that you're doing. We also appreciate the hard work that Faisal is doing in the City of Vancouver, so stay tuned. And lastly to George, thank you so much for being part of this important conversation today. We really appreciate it. So without further ado, we're gonna jump on our slide, so give us a sec.
Hold tight.
Is it this one?
Yeah, I think so.
Share. And then that's not it.
Okay, good.
Okay, hold on. We're having some tech issues here. Oh my gosh. Stop share. Sorry. Here it is. No, that's not it. Is that it? No, that's not it. Chris, I think you have to help us.
Oh yeah, go share.
Share?
Yeah, hold on.
No, that's not it.
Yeah. You could drag your presentation there.
Okay, hold on. Sorry.
You can press that link that's right there, and then it'll be harder.
Oh, no, is that?
Oh my God.
Stop share.
Stop share.
If it's not working, I can also share from mine. You guys can just tell me.
Oh, can you do that for us, George?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you.
2 seconds here. Let's just.
Sorry, we're not in the
So
business.
we're so close.
There we go.
Awesome.
There we go.
Okay.
And you can even just give me a point at me and I can do it.
Okay, awesome. So my name is Cincy Sear and I'm the co-founder of Sea to Sky Removal along with my husband and co-founder, Chris Arkell. We are very excited to get you inspired to divert construction waste and share ways we can keep our planet happy and healthy during this uncertain time. Again. Okay, a bit about us. Oh, go back.
Back.
No, that one.
There we go.
Perfect. Oh, nope, the other one. Perfect. A bit about us and why we do what we do. Let's start with nature. Chris and I love it. The more time we spend immersed in forests, close to the ocean, and gazing at sunsets, the more of a relationship we form with them. From this place, we are more inclined to act in ways we are caring and even protective of our planet. So let's jump on a journey and come out with tools to shift the way we look at waste and get inspired to create positive change when it comes to diversion.
So our business began when we realized a greener approach to construction removal was needed. I have over 25 years of experience in construction, with 11 of those years owning my own contracting company. All the waste removal companies I'd used in the past were not focused on the environment, so I pitched the idea to Cincy and we jumped on an eye-opening and rewarding journey together. We are the first waste hauler in the world to become an official B Corp certified company. Unlike the traditional corporation that gives priority only to financial profitability, B Corps actually look at the triple bottom line and use the power of business to address social and environmental problems. It's going to take a community of leaders from across the world who work together and drive a global movement of using the power of business as a force for good, resulting in a positive impact for their employees, communities, and the environment. And most recently, we were recognized as the Best for the World honoree in the environmental category. We earned this honor for our high impact work that placed us at the top tier of the B Corp community.
The volume of construction waste generated worldwide every year, according to a report from Transparency Market Research, will nearly double to 2.2 billion tons by 2025. If we stand any chance of averting a climate catastrophe, we must start with the construction industry and stop thinking of it in the same way we have been for the last few decades.
Slide.
Once I started to learn everything that was involved on the waste management end of the construction industry, and after many eye-opening trips to the landfill, I dove headfirst into the business and I haven't looked back. Speaking of the landfill or transfer station, if you haven't been, go. Yes, it's smelly and probably not a great social outing, but I promise it'll make you think twice about what you throw away, but I'm assuming everyone here has. Did you know that every scrap of so-called waste goes on a long and costly journey after the transfer station?
So where does it go? The short answer is that most of the waste received at any Metro Vancouver transfer station goes to the Vancouver landfill in Delta, the Metro Vancouver Waste to Energy facility in Burnaby, and Eco Waste in Richmond. The remainder gets sent to an out-of-region facility, which has over time been trucked to Rabanco in Washington State. Moving all this waste creates a huge carbon footprint. The less we waste, the better for our environment and beating climate change. Going to landfills and transfer stations has really opened our eyes to the dramatic amount of construction waste that is thrown away. Depending on how they are designed, landfills produce harmful greenhouse gases like methane and carbon dioxide, as well as leachate, which pollutes groundwater and soil. Even with strong preventative measures in place, fugitive emissions from landfills are a concern. In Canada, according to Environment Canada, landfills are responsible for 20% of national methane emissions. Methane is a greenhouse gas that is more harmful than carbon dioxide in terms of its global warming potential because it traps 21 times more heat than a molecule of carbon dioxide. And what we are witnessing is a major building boom, and the waste that is produced from these builds is taking out large volumes of space in our local landfills. If not managed properly moving forward, it will continue to clog them up and be a major polluter for centuries to come. In an ideal world, all builds and renovations would follow our green approach to waste management practices. Okay, according to Construction Specifications Canada, the construction industry is the greatest producer of wood waste, making up 25 to 45% of all solid waste generated in North America. More than half of construction and demolition related debris is recyclable or reusable and doesn't need to end up in the landfills, but very little of it is recycled or reused today. There's a lack of awareness, and some builders mistakenly assume that environmentally friendly practices will increase their costs. However, waste diversion can reduce disposal costs by up to 30%.
We service construction sites who have no space for a bin, as well as companies who want to build greener and don't want to use one. How our service works is we hand sort through endless amount of garbage bags as well as piles of construction waste by separating recyclables, reusable building materials, and general garbage. We literally open up all the bags on site, and in them will usually be recyclables such as metal, plastic, cardboard, wood, compostables such as a random banana peel or apple core, and single-use coffee cups. We even go to the extent of separating plastic sheets from tape that most contractors use as protection to separating and sorting those wee little bags of plastic, bags of nails and screws left from an appliance or cabinet. It's really eye-opening what this industry throws away. Once everything is hand sorted and separated, we then live load everything onto our truck systematically and take these items to the correct place to be responsibly disposed of. Recycling goes to numerous depot sites, reusable building materials get donated, and lastly, transfer stations or landfills for general garbage.
Through all this hard work and dedication, the volume of material we kept out of the landfills for both 2017 and 2018 was 1,963,790 pounds. That's about 2 million pounds simply by doing it the right way, deconstructing it. Through my time in construction, I was exposed to a large amount of waste categorized as garbage on construction sites, which wasn't the case. In a perfect world, less wood waste would be disposed of from the construction builds. As we stated before, it's the single largest item by volume that is thrown away. Each municipality is different in what they accept as clean wood. It's important to get a gauge on what is accepted and what is not. Make sure you're set up with proper wood separation area that meets the requirements of the municipality you will be disposing it in. Usable wood and pallets can also be donated to not-for-profits, schools, and artists, and we'll dive into that a little bit later. Brick, stone, and concrete can get broken down and remade back into the materials they came from and are also used as additives in new products. Did you know that up to 80 million pounds of used carpet and underlay are sent to Metro Vancouver's landfills each year? Carpet can be recycled, reducing the need for oil to produce new carpet and underlay. The Coquitlam transfer station is now accepting carpet as recycling, and so is pack recycling in Richmond. Large amounts of metal can get taken to either the metal recycling scrapyard or the general metal section at the transfer stations. Pretty easy to get rid of metal. Packaging is huge in the construction industry. Fixtures, electronics, furniture, appliances, you name it, whatever goes into a house usually comes packaged in cardboard. Cardboard is one of the easiest items to recycle, but that being said, if there's a large reduction in the amount used in the packaging, that would be beneficial by reducing our carbon output as well. Did you know that plastic can take up to 1,000 years to break down? Plastic waste takes way too long to decompose. Because styrofoam is so well known for being a major drain on the environment, it is luckily disappearing from our everyday lives, but not quickly enough. We still use foam cups for hot beverages, takeout containers, and we still receive foam padding in the boxes of large appliances. Styrofoam is made of polystyrene, a petroleum-based product, so it is not remotely sustainable. It does not biodegrade, meaning it takes up space in landfills or ends up in our oceans. Mostly every transfer station or landfill has a great setup for common soft and hard plastics, including styrofoam. The hard to recycle or headache or hybrid plastics are plastics that are found on construction sites that cannot be recycled at local transfer stations or landfills. These are EPS, foam sheets and blocks, black foam, thicker green plastic banding, as well as black or white strapping. Any plastic that has dirt or paint on it is also deemed garbage. These hard to recycle materials can be taken to our partner and diversion champions, WCS in North Vancouver. They will downstream it to their partners who will either resell it to plastic buyers and other companies who will melt it down and make plastic pellets. We are continuing to raise awareness about these hard to recycle plastics with associations, manufacturers, local municipalities, and of course the government to either find a solution for them as soon as possible or have them banned completely. One of the projects we worked on was removing a large amount of glass from a window manufacturer which went out of business. Our solution was to get bins strictly for glass. The bin company we worked with took the glass to EnviroCore Recycling, which reused the glass for sandblasting as well as road base. Just from this one project alone, we ended up diverting 17 tons from the landfill just by doing a little bit of research and working with a like-minded business. Gypsum or drywall, as it's commonly known, can essentially be recycled forever with no degradation to the material. Gypsum facilities keep the material in the supply chain, reducing the need to extract virgin material, which helps to preserve valuable natural resources for generations to come. We've seen great progress with there being a complete ban on drywall disposal into our general landfill debris. Contractors and the public have been forced to dispose of this material correctly, and the results have been outstanding.
It's beneficial to deconstruct your projects properly so that the materials will end up in a usable condition to donate and won't end up in the landfill. Squamish Rebuild, a non-for-profit, has diverted 900,000 pounds to date from the Squamish landfill just by receiving reusable building materials and reselling them to the community. There's a huge opportunity for these items to be reused, and this diversion rate is such a positive result. In a perfect world, every community would have a space dedicated to selling or donated reusable building materials. You can donate any reusable building materials such as windows, doors, lumber, plywood, light fixtures, appliances, furniture, sinks, cabinets to non-for-profits such as Restore, part of Habitat for Humanity, Urban Repurpose in North Vancouver, Whistler Rebuild It in Whistler, and Squamish Rebuild in Squamish. You can even reach out to schools who want to practice building with these materials or connect to artists who will create something beautiful and thought-provoking from your waste.
Between January 1st and October 17th, 2019, 521 black bears were destroyed due to mismanagement of waste. When it comes to keeping a site clean and green, we always need to be aware of the critters who coexist around us. We always recommend an actual bear-proof bin for organics, which is able to be locked and can be rolled away and stored safely during the night. This allows the organics to be disposed of properly, allowing them to go back into composting and ultimately turn back into usable soil. But the easiest thing you can do with food waste is pack it in and pack it out.
So whenever you feel stuck, as this all could become super overwhelming depending on what you need to recycle, we highly recommend downloading the Recycling Council of BC's Recyclepedia app. It's a quick and simple tool that helps you find more than 1,000 drop-off locations and recycling options for over 70 materials or products across the province.
Okay. Garbage is made up of a wide variety of single-use materials, broken materials, and anything that is contaminated or cannot be recycled. One of the companies we work with designed this garbage bin as it allows the crews to think twice before they throw certain materials away. Signage is key on your site. Labeling areas or spaces with proper information on where the crew can put certain materials in places creates a huge impact. You must be wondering how construction waste can be pre-sorted to avoid the landfill, aren't you? Well, we came up with a very simple but extremely effective solution.
So the more sites we visited, the more bags we went through, we start to see a pattern of recyclables thrown away since there weren't any tools, leadership, or policies implemented on sites. So we came up with this idea, which won a Small Business BC Award for Best Concept. We created and implemented these on-site recycling stations, including proper use training to simplify job site pre-sorting. The concept is very simple but highly effective. The recycling stations are labeled with metal, cardboard, and plastic. This gives the crews the opportunity to not throw materials into a general bin or pile, but rather into its proper place. That's our dog, sorry. From every recycling station we service, we end up diverting 300 or more pounds of recyclables per service. In a study conducted by researchers at the University of British Columbia, placing a recycling station 1.5 meters away from point of entry or exit can dramatically boost recycling and composting rates by 141%. It all comes down to convenience. One of our biggest wins was a construction company that used the bin strictly for garbage and then had our recycling stations in front of the bin, so crews had a chance to recycle versus throw everything into one bin headed to the landfill. We serviced the site 5 times and diverted 2.5 tons of recyclables from entering the landfill. A couple of recommendations would have been to have one bin or space utilized for clean wood, and the other was to have a strict reusable mug policy, as we found way too many single-use disposable cups in their waste. All of us here have a huge opportunity to shift the way the construction industry discards materials, and Chris and I have seen the dramatic results these recycling stations have created. It's infectious, and the crews are very excited to know that they're making an impact.
This is Joe from Adisa Homes. We worked very closely with his team on designing the perfect waste area for his site. The one area that he put his foot down on was waste management. He knew this was a perfect place to lead by example and show his clients and colleagues that we can all do much better. His hope is that his company can be an inspiration to others in the industry and remove the stigma attached to green building practices being more expensive. It's not just the contractors who want to see these efforts. It's also the clients they work with too. People are becoming very aware of the waste problem that the construction industry is creating. By having strong leadership that's focused on waste management on your project, clients will benefit greatly by reducing their waste costs, meeting regulations, and you'll be able to communicate that you are minimizing landfill waste with your industry peers. Plus, you can share your efforts online too. We really appreciate it when Nikun Contracting shares their monthly recycling results on Instagram. It really starts a dialogue, and that leadership is very important to have in the construction industry.
So we recently presented at Buildex and a contractor from the audience attended. Here's what he had to say. I've been involved in residential construction since I was 8 years old, and even as a youngster, I was pretty aware of the embarrassing amounts of waste our industry produces. As I grew up in the industry, I couldn't figure out why this wasn't something we were taking seriously. Now at Blue Water has 4 to 5 sites going at any given time. Not only is more important to pay attention to this, but I feel we have the opportunity to implement the change we want to see across the industry. These signs in the photos will be seen attached to the sorting bins, which will be found across all of our sites with the goal of diverting as much waste from the landfill as possible. Many thanks to Sea to Sky Removal for building a company that gives us builders the option to make this happen, as well as the folks at Adisa Homes for the inspiration on the signs and sorting boxes. We have to start taking this seriously. And right now I feel like a very proud mother. Did you know Metro Vancouverites threw out 1.1 billion single-use items last year and an estimated 2.6 cups a week? Small acts such as investing in a reusable mug will save tons of Tim Hortons and Starbucks cups from hitting the landfill. We dispose of many contaminated single-use cups for the construction sites, and it honestly drives us crazy. We always push the companies we work with as well as our online community to implement a reusable mug policy on site.
That was 2.6 million cups a week.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Here are some ideas that you can implement right away. Number 1, encourage design that causes less waste. Whenever possible, look to salvage materials like brick, metals, or wood. Salvage materials typically have a much lower embodied carbon footprint than newly manufactured materials, since the carbon to manufacture them has already been spent. With reclaimed wood in particular, you not only save the energy that would have been spent in cutting the tree down, transporting it to the mill, and processing it, but the tree you never cut down is still doing the work of sequestering carbon. As you know, our friends at Unbuilders are doing some really impactful work, deconstructing homes versus demolishing them. They take this reclaimed wood to restore in Burnaby, amongst other materials such as heritage doors, windows, and so much more. Number 2, research your building materials. Can they be recycled? If not, can you speak to the rep or the manufacturer to redesign the materials so it can? Or can you source another product that is more sustainable? Number 3, avoid over-ordering. If available, use computer software to help accurately estimate required quantities. You can also minimize waste, particularly in wood-framed residential projects, designing in modules. Think in common sizes for common materials like 4x8 sheets of plywood, 12-foot drywall boards, 2-foot increments for wood framing, and pre-cut structural members. Number 4, create expectations for waste management practices with your crew at the beginning of a job. Proper training will help your crew determine what can be salvaged and what must be thrown away. Also, ask your suppliers if they will take back the packaging, and if so, find out what they are doing with it. 5, unbuild or deconstruct. This is a recent picture of a job we did with Bee Collective, who meticulously deconstructed this kitchen and everything such as cabinetry, sinks, a freezer, gas stove, washer, dryer, all of it was diverted from the landfill and taken to our partner at Urban Repurpose in North Vancouver. Unbuild buildings rather than knock them down to increase the amount of undamaged materials that can be salvaged. Also, deconstruct part of the renovation so materials can be repurposed or donated. And lastly, work with Nickel Brothers as they find a new location for that house you want to remove. Number 6, create a zero waste policy. Dedicate a site area for diverting materials such as metal, cardboard, and plastics, including organics, and please implement a reusable mug policy on your site and in your office. Number 7, do a waste audit. Collect all your materials in a clear bag, and at the end of the week, go through what you have. Try and figure out what your garbage is and see how you can improve it. Number 8, work with trades who align with your values and also the planet's. Ask your trades how they manage their waste that they are creating from your site. Number 9, coordinate a shoreline cleanup or a similar event. Connect with organizations such as Vancouver Surf Rider or the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup or another group that you feel connected with. We're always on board to help with a beach cleanup. This is one we did with Blackfish Homes. And lastly, number 9, always be Number 10, number 9. Always be proactive. By learning and connecting with your local politicians and industry associations, we need more voices like you in this industry to create positive change on waste management.
So here's another impactful quote. If it can't be reduced, reused, repaired, rebuilt, refurbished, refinished, resold, recycled, or composted, then it should be restricted, redesigned, or removed from production. Well, we can all agree we throw too much away. Everyone has a different idea of what value and what doesn't. We throw away far too much because it's easier, and too few of us reuse because we've been taught newer is better. It's important to think of waste not as a problem, but as a natural resource waiting to be harvested. The construction industry has to become zero waste. Is it possible? We all have to try our absolute hardest to make sure it does.
We now have the tools, the education, and responsibility to provide solutions that minimize the climate impact of the structures we design and build. Thank you very much, everyone. That's it, George.
Okay,
Thank you,
awesome.
George.
I see we've got a question here from Scott Kennedy. Do you service all of Metro Vancouver?
We do. We service all of Metro Vancouver and all of the Sea to Sky up to Whistler as well.
Do you guys do anything in the valley, or are you open to the valley?
Yep. Yeah, our crews were there yesterday.
Okay, great. Any other quick questions? We'll get into the meatier stuff, as I say, later on. But any other quick questions for folks here? Either you can jump into the chat or ask something.
There was a question from Simon on pressure treated lumbers, the cutoffs from pressure treated wood. Is there anything we can do with those at this point?
Not, unfortunately, no, not at this point. Treated lumber is still landfill, unfortunately, which is really sad because that's a huge contributor to the leachate that ends up in the groundwater and that. So pressure treated wood is although it lasts a long time, it is not good for the environment.
Sorry, someone just threw like a cherry bomb outside my window. It was very loud. That's a bit spooky. Thank you, everyone. Those are great questions there. And thank you, Cincy and Chris. That's awesome. Last but certainly not least, I'm going to hand it over to Faisal here from the City of Vancouver, who's a long-standing advocate, actor in this space, sits on the National Zero Waste Committee for circular buildings. Do I have that right? And holds a number of other roles in this space. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, George. I will just upload my file right now. Bear with me. Great. Can everybody see that okay? Great. Awesome. Okay. First of all, thank you, everybody, for being here. Originally, like Chris said, that this was supposed to be an in-person presentation, but really happy that we can do this. This is also, I think, my third Zoom call today, so it is a different way of doing things, but really happy to meet all of you. I just wanted to also thank George for doing a great job of organizing, and Chris for coordinating this, and for Cincy, Chris, and Cassidy for just doing such inspiring work. The job of the city is to enable companies like you so that you can actually succeed. And I work very closely with the landfill and the transfer station, so I'm at the bottom end. However, I would love to be put out of a job. Obviously, I want a new job where because I actually do have sustainable, sort of more transferable skills. So I'll be talking about the four things, and then having a conclusion to wrap it all up. I'll be providing more of an overview of demolition waste and the case for thinking ahead, and two initiatives that we're working on at the city specifically within the region. Just if you don't know, especially if you're not part of the area here, that we're part of Metro Vancouver's Integrated Solid Waste and Resource Recovery Plan, Resource Management Plan rather, and they're actually in consultation for a new one. However, within that, within the 23 entities, which includes 21 municipalities, we actually own and operate a landfill in Delta, and then we also own and operate a transfer station located in Vancouver, which is right here. Within the construction and demolition region marketplace, it's eco-waste is another large one as well, and we keep in close ties with all of the players because we want to make sure that whatever we provide, it complements the marketplace and provides more about risk mitigation rather than competing with these companies. Within Metro Vancouver, about 78% is recycled. Maybe some of that is reused, but most of it's recycled, and most of that it can be chipped into either hog fuel for more cleaner burning pulp and paper mills and for boilers, as well as for cement kilns as well. And then what's left is about 400,000 tons of C&D in the region. That doesn't include any kind of leakage that goes to the States or to the Fraser Valley. And as you can see here, the Vancouver landfill and eco waste comprise of the most of the C&D. George mentioned this before. I'm just going to revisit it again. Within our Zero Waste 2040, which was passed by Council in 2018, there are 4 main areas that we are working on with the sort of more sort of preliminary primary actions that we take, as well as sort of longer term actions. Because as you know, being the city, we have some power. We have a lot of power as it relates to our actual assets that we can own and operate, like the transfer station, the landfill, even though we do a lot of stakeholder engagement with Metro Vancouver and with Delta, we only have so many levers that we can pull with respect to influencing things. So we are trying to be a leader, but also we're being mindful of the marketplace as well. And I'll be highlighting that as it relates to the these 3 different items here. The zero waste hierarchy is very similar. This is what the one that actually comes out of our Zero Waste 2040 plan. The thinking ahead is more on the avoid and reduce as it relates to you know, companies like Nickel Brothers and Sea to Sky. Sorry, avoid and reduce. But yeah, in terms of the reuse, and below that, this is the kind of things that we're working on as well. But obviously, we want this stuff to reduce so that we can be higher up on the waste hierarchy. There's definitely a case for thinking ahead. So the best reuse is to reuse the whole house. So definitely a shout out to Nickel Brothers. Really excited about the work they're doing. And I had no idea just watching the presentation of the great stuff that they're doing and just thinking about the logistics about getting these houses moved. And I just think it's a great stuff that they're doing. Also, just with Sea to Sky, I did a panel a couple of years ago with Sea to Sky and Chris. And just the fact that they go into the garbage bags is fantastic. Just a little thing, like we did a pilot plant at the Vancouver landfill to just do some shredding, and we couldn't even touch the waste. Like we can't touch it because we deal with thousands of tons every day. But we know that there's a lot of little things in there that definitely could be reused. So just a shout out for them as well to get really get their hands dirty in that. And just their passion of I think we definitely, and being in the position we are with the city of Vancouver and within Metro Vancouver, we definitely can be a leader to influence change throughout the world too. Deconstruction is the next best thing if you can't move the house. And why is because of, you know, health things, you know, demolishing a house in terms of like noise and dust is not good for the environment and good for the neighbors as well. Adam will definitely attest that he's told us stories about neighbors who've been around the a house that's being deconstructed versus being demolished. Is that demolition tends to breed aggressive reactions, whereas deconstruction brings more of a community together and a motivation to try to reuse as much of the wood as they can, as close as possible to the house, if not within the house, maybe making some cool furniture or wall or flooring as well. So happy neighbors, and then embodied carbon as well. But that, you know, the like George said with that great slide from Zizzo's strategy, that the amount of energy and carbon that's in the wood, most of it is coming in from how it's manufactured and transported and within the supply chain, and then just the usage afterwards. So we want to try to reduce that as much as possible. And then, yeah, using old growth wood, since he brought that up as well. So the more that we can use that she outlined that great picture of an old growth wood versus some 2x4 that you could buy at Home Depot. So this is one of the documents that City of Vancouver put together. My colleague, Lisa Bordeaux, who helped me put this presentation together, she has been great at being a partner in this with me. I'm sort of dealing with the day-to-day as it relates to waste management, but our sustainability group is trying to get us thinking about higher up. So again, you know, the energy that's involved and the GHGs involved with extracting and manufacturing, assembling materials definitely needs to be taken into account with the carbon, embodied carbon footprint, and the less we use, the better. and that is no more prevalent with, is most prevalent with actually reusing and even moving the house. One of the other things that we're working on is the the deconstruction hub. We went out to market to provide $250,000 to a company that could leverage its infrastructure to actually take their selling of salvage wood to the next level. And I'm allowed to announce that it is Habitat for Humanity who's working closely with the end builders. So I'm really happy about that. We're because of COVID, we never got a chance to officially announce that, but it is public. So you heard it here first. And so we're really excited about that. And the money will be used to get them to get to the next level on selling the salvage material. And what that involves is when a house is being deconstructed, an appraiser, such as unbuilders, will come to the house and actually appraise the wood for its actual value. And then that tax receipt when the donation goes to Habitat for Humanity, it classifies as a tax receipt. And Adam is working on some really cool things about how to make it so that the tax receipt timing gets closer to the time of decision of when the house is being deconstructed, so that they can see that savings quicker. One thing as well is like Portland is a municipality that we look to really a lot, and we're on May the 19th. There's a webinar that we're working with, and I definitely advise you to catch that, where Portland will talk about some of the successes of how they've gotten such a great market in this salvage wood material and a marketplace and selling that stuff. So we haven't really got there, and I'll mention why later on. But
sorry, can you just say who's hosting that webinar? I don't think.
Oh, the National Zero Waste Council is hosting that webinar. Yeah. Thank you, George. And this hub will just will take the donated salvage materials from that have been appraised by a professional, and then shoppers will buy that salvage material. And we just want to elevate that and get that more up and running. The green demolition bylaw we did as well. There's a slide that follows this about the timeline, but where we are right now is that 30 to 40% of the waste at the landfill is C&D at our landfill, and there are about 80 to 100 single-family demo permits per year within. I believe that's just within Vancouver, because it's about 3,000 within Metro Vancouver. Is that not correct, George? Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, this is the timeline here for Metro Vancouver, starting from Metro Vancouver in 2012. They created a template bylaw that the 23 entities could take and actually make into their own green demo bylaw. The City of Vancouver seems to be the first one that did it, but Surrey and Richmond have followed suit, and we're just looking forward to seeing more of that come in place. There's some pluses and minuses of that, and one of them is definitely market. Definitely there's a policy part as well, but the markets in Vancouver, they're just not there yet. But I'm really hopeful from what George was showing with the 5 different markets that were created as a result of the STEP code. So I'm hoping that will transfer to this as well. So and then so in 2018 we released our 2040 strategy, and then there was some updates to the green demolition bylaw. We have looked at actually trying to expand that. If I go back to this slide here, to more of like beyond 1950s homes. But this is when we start getting into the homes that start using not as good the old growth material. And some of these homes, as you get into the 70s and 80s, will be, as Adam calls it, they're single-use homes. So those ones are going to be very, very difficult to salvage with all the glues and the nails and the composites as well. But there's definitely an opportunity to capture as much of the deconstruction and moving of houses as much as we can now. For the green demolition bylaw, successes are we've had a high compliance rate of 98%, and we've had high diversion rates. The challenge is the documentation. I don't believe a lot of the paperwork that's been submitted. I have actually been to some of the places that are officially received, that are official recyclers that are regulated by Metro Vancouver, and it's just really hard. So we have to be cognizant that if we try to expand through policy and mandate, that there are not going to be these unintended consequences of lots of paperwork and people finding loopholes to actually make this happen. And again, we can't track the leakage that's going to the States or to the Fraser Valley. So we have to balance all of that. And we're really looking closely at Portland to try to see how they did it. But I'm hoping that, you know, with this, just what George told me, I've been really inspired just to try to find those catalysts for markets so that they can start to take that on, so it can take root and actually accelerate. So yeah, there's very little and no salvage on some of the properties as well. And then there's just constraints, like what we said, with the wood recycling market. Things that we want to do are, you know, we want to expand the green demo, but again, there are limitations that with respect to markets and what's out there right now. But we are seeing a lot of promise, and you know, seeing companies like Sea to Sky that are so passionate about what they do, that and finding that value, that I'm really hopeful for the future on this. But for planning for the end of life, sorry, what's happened is my slide is covered by all of your faces here. So planning for the end of life at the design stage and looking at the life cycle and embodied carbon and then designing for deconstruction is really important. As you know, a lot of these permits, and I am very aware that the City of Vancouver has a lot of hurdles in its permitting process. Like it or not, the demolition or the deconstruction of the home, and most developers right now and contractors, is not at front of mind. It's like, get it down. We waited for months to years to get this thing. Let's get it down. So we have to kind of manage that as well. And really happy to see that the city is looking at how they can sort of accelerate permits as well. And then in conclusion, want to leave this with you, that, you know, what are the opportunities so that we can think more long-term about our materials? And then where can you influence your material flows? I'm happy to listen. Thank you, George, Cincy, Chris and Cincy, and Cassidy and Chris Hill for putting this on. Really an honor to be here. Over to you, George.
Okay, amazing. So much cool work going on. As Faisal said, that, you know, the City of Vancouver was one of the first to dive in here, but there's a breadth of really interesting things being done across the region. I think if I put my Vancouver hat on for a second, be a little bit biased, I think we are leading the way, and folks like Faisal are very much on the bleeding edge of that work. But it's a really cool time to be involved in these municipal conversations. It's one of my colleagues, who many of whom you might know, Monty Paulson from RDH Building Sciences. You know, he always talks about the step code and all of the various transformations from that, meaning that the building industry is in the greatest point of transformation since the invention of the elevator. And I think if we think about the energy transformation plus circularity plus seismic plus, you know, we add all these new lenses that we're bringing in, we really are on the edge of something fascinating. And just speaking for myself, when I was in Europe last year, even though, you know, I was kind of coming cap in hand to some of the jurisdictions or organizations there saying, well, we'd love to learn from you, they were saying, oh my gosh, this and this and this and this that you guys are doing is really exciting too. So I think we should be proud of what's going on here in the city of Vancouver and in our broader region here. I'm going to open up to questions now. We have a few that we dreamt up for folks that can kind of guide the conversation, but I just want to open up first if anybody has any immediate questions to what Faisal was saying or anything else that came up here. So I'm just going to mute myself, and if you either want to use the raise your hand function or maybe throw something in the chat, hey, I'd like to speak, then please do so. Or I see Cincy there actually wants to go first. Yeah, do you want to throw a comment in?
Faisal, where's the new deconstruction hub?
I think it's going to be with Habitat for Humanity's existing facility in the Fraser Valley. So, but we still are. We just signed the contract with them, and really, it's not for us to try to get in there and tell them how to do it. Just hoping that they'll leverage as much of their infrastructure as possible to take it to the next level.
That's awesome news.
Awesome.
Just ask a question. I'd like to thank everyone. Great presentations, great information. I'd like to share some of these references with my colleagues. Would I be able to, will you be sharing the slide decks or the recording of this meeting? I'm curious about that.
I have recorded the meeting. And so I think what I will plan to do is make sure that I have permission from the presenters, and then I will work to share the video for sure of the presentation. And then my intention would be to this presentation is all in one slide deck. So I think we would also share the deck because there's a number of really helpful links in there. And while I have the mic, quickly, I would say on a technical side of things, for the AIBC credits, there was a question on there that I was answering back and forth privately, but my intention, I didn't get any of the AIBC numbers, but this is an accredited class. So I will send out what I can and match it up. I've screenshotted our attendance and I'll match it up to your emails. If you do have there's a few people that I see that have called in. If you don't get that from myself or Passivhaus Canada then in the next few days, feel free to reach out to myself. I will very hesitantly put my email on the chat.
No spam though, right?
No spam. Just really good questions about your AIBC credits.
I see a question for Cassidy there about how much time did you say you would need to find a potential buyer for a building to be relocated? I think you allocated to the fact you're often contacted when it is too late.
My spacebar isn't working to unmute for some reason. Yeah, so generally we like to have 3 to 12 months to be able to market the building and find another property for it and line up the permits, because we need the demo permit to be approved at the origin site, and we also need the build permit to be approved at the destination site. I mean, that being said, occasionally there will be a home that's just perfect and we have a buyer that's looking for exactly that, and we can make it happen a bit sooner. Like we actually had a home in North Van recently that we were able to like do an open house with that home and move it to the new location within, I think it was like 4 to 6 weeks. Like it was a really short time frame. But that's definitely one of those serendipitous things. So if we can have 3 to 12 months, even if you haven't started your permit process, but the home's going to have to not be there at some point, we're happy to get involved at that point, just to make sure that we have enough time to work with you and get it all done.
Great, thank you, Cassidy. And then to see the sky, do you know what happens to the recycled material after you sell them? For instance, I've heard that only 10% of plastic collected in recycled programs is actually recycled. Also, what is the most in-demand recycled material other than metal?
Okay, good question. So I'll start off. So we actually don't sell the hard to recycle plastics. We're so passionate about what we do, we actually pay to get rid of them. So we pay for the hard to recycle stuff that isn't taken by any of the standard municipal recycling centers. We will pay WCS to take them. And one of the things with the amount that we're paying, it's not that much, but it is a fee, but it's also not enough for them to be making sole profit off of what they're taking in for us. So it's in their best interests to find buyers and find markets for it. The percentage of what gets recycled is really dictated by what the market, what's valuable in the market at the time. So that will change sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly. We have a really good relationship with them, so we trust them with what they're doing. Back in the beginning when we started working with them, we vetted them really hard, and they are doing their best to get everything out into the market to be recycled or taken care of and avoid the landfill or avoid going to waste to energy. So the percentage on that changes quite frequently. What is the most in-demand recycled material other than metal? I would say it was cardboard. Cardboard is really good because it's easily to be recycled. China, I guess it was maybe like a year and a half ago with their restrictions on taking in the world's recycling, so to speak, really dropped the market for a lot of products. But I do believe that cardboard out of everything right now is still holding its value relative to the other materials being recycled. So I hope that answers the question.
Maybe just to pick.
I'm also.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Colin.
Yeah. Also curious, like if you've seen the Marketplace documentary on like just recycling products to the green bins even, and Marketplace put some GPS trackers and found where it was. And a lot of times it just ends up getting abandoned in some poor country. So I think that there's a big push for corporations not to worry. They're like, oh, don't worry about this packaging. We'll recycle it later. Yeah. But we're not actually recycling nearly of what we're doing. So I'm curious to know also, like, what are the in-demand recyclable products? Like, what actually has a market where they're like, ooh, gimme, gimme, gimme. Whereas I seem like plastics is kind of like a forcing, or like post-consumer cardboard, like to make a new bag, you can't have more than like 30% old waste. So you still have to have 70% new. So what is that? What are the things that really have no market and what really has a market?
For us, for the products that we deal with from the construction industry, I would say the products that are more made out of the virgin plastics have a higher value. The plastics that are able to be reused and remade into pellets, the products that obviously don't have to go to waste to energy, those have high value. Metal is always going to be number one. It changes so frequently that if you're talking about the construction industry, I know what you're saying about the green bins and those products, and they track them where they're going. I think the construction industry specifically, and where we take our recyclables, it's in their best interest to be able to recycle them and have a market for them. So I couldn't tell you exactly what is the most in demand right now, because that changes a lot. I do expect and hope that it's going to become like the EPS plastics, the plastic banding, the stuff that is more virgin, that can be reused and put into pellets for, I guess, second grade plastics. I feel like we're in the transition right now in the market for that. It's a transition that's happening quite hugely right now. So we're hoping that it goes in the direction where those second grade plastics all of a sudden have more value than what they are right now, which is maybe waste to energy. So I would say the more virgin the plastic, the more value it has.
That's some great additional context. I think it's also worth noting that the government of Canada at the national level is having a lot of conversations about plastic waste. There's obviously, I think, a real focus on, I should say obviously, but there has been politically a real focus on consumer plastics for, I think fairly obvious reasons. It's very tangible to folks. But I guess I'm watching those processes with the hopes that we start to see more active conversations around extended producer responsibility, et cetera, in the kind of national plastic space. I think one thing I want to put to sea to sky as well is you guys are very careful with the terminology you use, right, about green demolition and these distinctions between home recycling, as Cassie was putting it, deconstruction, green demolition, so on and so on, a spectrum of engagement with materials. But can you say a little bit more about how you guys are framing that and maybe some of the kind of what to watch for when you're looking at waste removal companies as far as the language they're using? Because I think, again, you guys are really careful about the language you use. And I think it's helpful for people to understand where they might get led astray if someone's talking about, yeah, we're pretty green when we demolish things.
Definitely. I think for us, we walk the walk of what we talk. So we also have the stats and the data behind us. We track 25 to 30% of the loads that we do. We track all the weights and the volumes that we interact with and what we recycle. So when we're talking about our materials, we are definitely recycle, reuse, donatables. All the materials that we're dealing with, we have all the data behind what we are doing. We definitely see in our industry, because our industry is, realistically, if you could just have a truck, pick up material and call yourself a recycler and dump it all into the landfill. So we really try and back what we say and what we're doing with the stats. And we're very open with our data as well. We'll provide it to anyone, which is not typical in waste hauling. Most waste haulers are very closed about their data. We feel the more transparency that we have and the more ability we have to share the data that we have is going to create a larger conversation. I think for us, becoming B Corp certified is like it's a third party, adjudicator showing that what we've done has been monitored and proven. So we kind of like to let what we do take precedence, and there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of greenwashing that goes along. Anyone can say that they recycle, and there's no accountability if they are throwing it away. But we try and document, photo. We have a lot of data over the 4 years that we've been in business that we just try and push out there and share with everyone and say, this is what we're doing, this is where it goes. And yeah, the market changes all the time. So sometimes, we have to catch up, or we have to be ahead of what's happening. But we like that. It's an interesting, and it kind of progresses us to where we need to be.
I think what's also standing us apart is that we are highly vocal on education. We just basically give free education, and we get everybody on board, about what goes where, what gets recycled, what can't be recycled. You can donate this. Like, we just want things to go the right way, and we want things to be easy for us. And these are the challenges that we have come across, and we try and find solutions for them. So we're kind of doing a bit of the legwork that most companies don't do, but we do it because we want all the renovators or the builders to be able to go into a place and recycle something, and not be able to be like, well, I can't recycle this here, so I've got to throw it in the landfill. So we really work with the municipalities and get them on board and let them know, hey, these are the type of plastics that are coming through this industry. We need to find solutions for them right away, or else everyone doesn't have time to, go to this place to donate it, or that place. We wanted a central hub, and we want it to be consistent throughout all the municipalities, so that no one has this, headache where they're like, oh, I don't have time to do this. We want it to just be done properly. And that's kind of our MO.
I think a call to action I'm hearing out of that for you folks is, if you're in the process of hiring some folks, maybe like Sea to Sky, ask for that data. And if they don't want to provide it, and they don't have a good reason for why, then you've got some questions. And I mean,
Exactly.
Cassidy, you had a bunch of stats about the diversion rates and the amount of materials you guys were saving. Being in business for 60 years means I'm sure you have a lot of that stuff. So I don't know if you want to say anything else about the kind of definitions or framing, but I think in terms of giving people actions to take home on their work, it sounds like that data question is a really easy place to start.
Yeah, I think what Sea to Sky companies aren't very open about their stats is true. I know, like, I've only worked with Nickel Brothers for about 1.5 years, and the waste management industry was new to me at that point. And I know I spent a lot of time up front just trying to find stats for different municipalities and different companies that, were supposedly doing really great work. And a lot of that was really hard to find. So I've spent actually quite a bit of time in the last 1.5 years making sure that we have case studies available, and finding companies we can partner with that have those things available. But I agree. I think even more so than the terminology, I think just finding places that actually are transparent is really important, and actually kind of doing the due diligence of looking into whether or not the people that you're working with are doing what they say they're doing. Like I bring up the stat that, most deconstruction companies are saving about 20% of materials on average. And I mean, there are definitely companies that are doing really, really great work, like Adam at Unbuilders in Vancouver, but there are a lot of other unbuilding companies that not unbuilding companies, but deconstruction companies that are really more like demolition companies. And I mean, I've seen videos of them where they go in, and they're just, you have these beautiful, like, old classic solid fir floors, and they're just going in with a crowbar and ripping them up, rather than actually taking them piece by piece and salvaging them. So I think just really being aware that just because someone calls themselves something doesn't mean that that's what they're doing for you. Yeah.
Buyer beware. Yeah. If it's okay with folks, I think I just want to throw up some questions here that we kind of brainstormed together around what the, some questions we wanted to hear from you guys, or maybe hear you engage with a little bit. I would say for Faisal and myself, hearing more about how we can help you guys get to circularity, or get, any one of these options we're describing, right? Recycling of homes, deconstruction, green demolition. We want to think about materials in more advanced, sophisticated ways. And whatever we can do to help support you in that process, we want to know about. So I just want to throw it out to you folks if you want to respond to any of these questions about wherever we want to go, or any reflections you have. But yeah, I just want to throw something up to spark some conversation.
This, from me, I think the biggest issue is you have to start. And so don't be afraid to try it and see where it leads you.
Take a leap. Yeah, great advice.
I mean, I can second that too. As a company that's been doing this for a while and definitely familiar with the companies that are talking about it, it actually, once, I think it was in the Sea to Sky thing, is the aligned trades, is you can get a team on board quite quickly. And it's not even, we're a consumer-based company, like facing companies, so we've got to get our clients to buy into this. And we've had zero kickback from that. We've had the opportunity to post a number of houses, and now our policy is when we look at a house, if it's going to be demolished, is the first thing we do is call Nickel Brothers. Often within just looking at Google Maps, they can give us an idea, and it's a really easy call, and it doesn't take a lot of time. That's a choice right away. And if it's possible to be sold, it's a massive cost saving for the clients, and every single one of the clients, it's like a win-win right out of the gate. And so that's been a massive bonus for us. I was going to spur the comment, and I'd like to know how, as a builder, I'm really excited about this idea of salvage products and using more of that as a hub. As a builder in Vancouver, maybe to this group, or is how can we take advantage of that more, to be using that? Because I know that there is a big hub, there is a big resource there. How do we get our hands on more of that material? And I think there's a lot of designers in this community within Passive House, and probably on this call as well, is how can we start incorporating that more into the products that we're doing? I would argue that there's probably a structural issue on some of them, but beyond that, there's still a lot of material that goes into a house that's not structural. I don't know who that question's to, but.
Feeling adventurous?
No one. Crickets. We get crickets.
No one wants to take the bait. I think the some of the unbuilders, like some of Adam's work in terms of like showing case studies of the usage of some of those materials in some of the new homes that they've worked on, I guess through their other business line, Naturally Crafted. There's some great case studies and examples. So if you haven't, we don't want to only plug the companies that are in this call or in our community, but I think, you can look at any one of the businesses here and see some examples of where those materials have been used in the past, and maybe get some ideas about how you can evolve them in the future. I think, one of the things we've been thinking about as an agency in the context of the COVID economic recovery, for example, is, are there ways that we can spec, whether that's in, government recovery funding or just, your organization, maybe it's a, local government, what have you, is there a way to spec in more reusable materials? We have a Wood First BC policy to get various forms of BC timber products into our buildings, but is there a way to do that for reusable materials as well? And I think there are some examples. Hazel, I don't know if you have any that you've seen in kind of the global context, Portland or otherwise, as far as speccing in reusable materials or reused materials.
Yeah, not to my knowledge. One thing, it sounds really great to spec things in, and I'm going to be one of the first people to say as soon as it comes into the the building permits, then you're talking like the building code, and Vancouver has its own building code, but building code in general, and it just depends on the engineer and the appetite for the municipality. So it can be tricky. I say give it a go, and always just don't give up. Just keep pounding, because if the market tells policy people, policy makers that we need to change, then it's going to happen. And it has happened just by the very nature of this call. But I just think that, we don't always know what's best. I think a lot of the times we just need the market to, I think having a balance of the market and the private sector together is, we're going to get this totally optimal solution. Of course, if you go in the private sector too much, then you get a function of what's happened in the States. And we don't really, in some cases, like with respect to the medical care and so forth, but having a balance is really important. But I say put our feet to the fire and tell us that you want more of it. And there was something else I was going to say, that it's slow, but it's definitely happening. I don't know.
Can I ask something in this? I'm as a designer, and as a designer sourcing this material, when you're speccing a material that you don't know where you can find it from, would be a challenge. How you can source a product that you don't know where to get it from, and how you can spec that in the drawings. But I usually do, if I try to, especially when it comes to the renovations, we try to reuse the existing material in that house with refurbishing them. But when it comes to something that's not existing in that house, you're saying that let's reuse a material that it's speccing somewhere that you don't know where you get it from. I mean, there was a jack building material that has been out of business for a couple of years now, and other than that, there's not so many sources available that you can say, I want this type of material and you can get it from this place, unless you guys know something. I don't know about that.
Is it a place to plug the deconstruction hub, Basil? Is
Yeah,
some of what it'll be?
Definitely. And, they are, like Habitat for Humanity does have an online presence as well. And I think that's definitely where things are going to go. When things start to look in the deconstruction world like Shopify, not so much Craigslist, but, cool things like, Shopify or even Facebook Market. Okay, forget about Facebook Market. But I'm just saying that if things start to elevate to a point where it starts looking like Amazon and things, then we know that we've reached it. And I think we're gonna get there if there's certain ways of certifying and for certain ways so that it can fall into a category, making it easier for permits to go through because they fit into a certain type of category. But I think, yeah, it's one thing too is that the city of Vancouver is, and just the region as well, is like just all of the region is still not even the size of Toronto. So I think we have to be realistic as well, that we have to really think of ourselves more as like Cascadia, with Washington and the other states as well that comprise west of the Cascadia Mountains, that we have to think more like that and how we can do more across the border. I'm really excited about what Nickel Brothers is doing, that they just say Washington State like it's nothing. And for us, when I think of like trying to cross borders and working for a city and municipality, I just think of, oh no, just more permits to go through. So really that's what we need to do, is just make it more seamless so that we're acting as a group.
Speaking as somebody who has a lot of clients who probably have an awful lot of houses right now that we would like to demolish, if we could get a city approval to move a house off of its lot through Nickel Brothers, or possibly demolish it in a very green way like Unbuilders, and could do it earlier without having to wait, because the problem, that would be a great incentive for me to get my clients to do that. Because right now we can't even touch the house until we have a building permit for the new project. And I know that's a different policy at Vancouver about saving rental housing, but I've got a little house that I personally own now that there's no way anybody's ever going to live in it again, as far as I'm concerned, because it's had a hoarder in it, then it got ransacked, and then the mice and everything else moved in. And so, but I could unbuild it. And if we could do it earlier, I could do the same thing with my clients. I might do it anyways because I have a different reason for thinking about that. But if the city had a policy that could say we could do a deal with Nickel Brothers, and if we have a place for the house to go, and we can take it off its foundation earlier, I think that would really incent a lot of clients to do that.
I am so excited that you brought that up because that's something that we've approached the city of Vancouver about. And I think it's a little bit of a process to change all the permitting, but I love that, you as someone in that industry is supportive of that idea. We had proposed a hierarchy where if you're recycling, like relocating the whole building and able to reuse the whole building, it would be expedited to a certain extent and potentially even a cheaper permit. And then if you're unbuilding, it would be like a second priority, so still faster than the demo and maybe another tier of cost. And then the demolition would be the lowest priority and the highest cost is what we were proposing.
I will support you. Just send me a letter. I'll send a letter to the city. I'll push as many buttons as I can. But I can think of 3 townhouse projects we're working on right now, probably 10 buildings. One of them is like 10 years old, brand new, beautiful house.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot of projects where that would be fantastic and we can make them go faster.
Yeah, and Scott, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to chime in here. I'm calling from Monroe, Washington, which is outside Seattle, and we're currently working with Nickel Brothers. We have 2 historic homes. They've named them Hattie and Harriet, beautiful historic homes that currently for sale. The owner of the property is planning to build apartments. And luckily we knew about this early enough so that we have lots of time. They're not going to be dealt with until September. So hopefully someone will be able to move them. Currently dealing with a lot of people that are trying to do that. But I just wanted to, number one, thank all of you for the good work you're doing. Our Historical Society is very active in trying to preserve beautiful old buildings, repurpose. The upcycling is just something we all believe in very strongly. And the community grassroots feelings about these projects and doing what you're all doing is there. Boy, people have just come out of the woodwork to say thank you for trying to save these buildings. The public support is unreal. So thanks to all of you for the work you do. Everyone loves it. And we hope we can save our 2 houses.
Tammy, I did notice you had a question about whether or not those homes could be part of the San Juan development.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge that we're having with Hattie and Harriet specifically is that we don't have an easy barge location to get them to. So we're trying to look at them almost as though they're a little bit landlocked and try to find somewhere close by that they could be road moved to.
Right.
I'll definitely mention it to Nick and see if that's an option if we had a specific place for them to be barged to. But I think that was the challenge that we were having with that as an idea. Yeah, just so you know.
Yeah, go to either Everett or Seattle, I guess, for barging. Yeah. Thank you.
In that, I know that we've looked at it with Nickel Brothers on a couple of our projects. I know that there was a general and I don't mean to cut us off from Washington, but in Vancouver there was a general area because of that barge location that worked really well. Like it was a couple of geographical spots that were like kind of sweet spots for you. What were those again? I had to put you on the spot.
Oh, I have to be honest. I would have to look them up. I deal with all of our offices, and I don't have all of the exact barging locations memorized. I'm sorry.
No, it's all in like there's a few things that remembered me. Is I remember the South Marine Drive, like where South Vancouver is a bit of a problem because there's quite a few power lines that they can't move out of the way to get to the water there.
I know we just started barging out of the Auto Mall in North Van.
Yeah.
Yeah, which there's some side roads there that don't really have any lines that are fairly accessible.
So I believe North Burnaby, the North Shore were all really good candidates. Richmond had some spots, if I remember correctly. But just wanted to I remember that was really helpful for us on our project.
I'll get that list and I'll send it out to everyone after the fact. That's a good point, Chris. Thank you.
No problem.
This is a shout out to Scott. Like, we definitely want to help. I'm working on a project right now where I'm looking at using a 1 acre site in the south part of Vancouver which was normally a recycling operation, to turn it into a clean technology demonstration center. And I'm really excited about it. Thing is that, as soon as you start going through the permitting, like the city of Vancouver is a huge organization. And there's so many, I don't know if you've ever read our Vancouver Charter, we have our own building code. It's so complex that when I try to give something that's out of the box, it's really hard to push it through. But you know, I'm gonna help where I can, because actually my colleagues Brad Bedelt and Lisa Bordeaux at the City of Vancouver are really keen on having more of the architectural and design community on board to start speccing these things, because that's what it is. So like, you know, definitely you have more power than you think. But if I can help on a specific project, I'll try to see what we can do and at least have a conversation with the permitting department if I can facilitate that for you.
Good, thanks. That would be useful for sure.
I also saw a question here from TaxCon about the resource for funding building product options with low embodied carbon. Really cool question, and I think there's a bunch of different answers we could spit out for this. I would say that one of the best resources, and Passive House Canada and BC have collaborated with them in the past, is the Embodied Carbon Network. They're a global network. They have a Vancouver chapter here that has done some really cool and exciting work. We have quite frankly, we have some of the global thought leaders in this space in the Pacific Northwest region here, particularly in Vancouver and Seattle. They have a lot of ideas around where you can get some of these products, some of the tools that are available. One of the things that I always like to recommend is there's a really cool company out of the Netherlands called Delestre. And I can put a link in the chat here. I was just trying to find a visualization, but they have a tool that they use that's really been pushed by the Dutch government. They use what they call material passports, if you've heard that term before. You know, tracking the life of a product over its entire life cycle. But if you think of a building as being constituted of a whole bunch of these products, right? You've got your copper, you've got like unfinished sort of more raw materials, and then you've got like fixed products. All of those are materials that are potentially resaleable or have some sort of value. They've actually built a dashboard where you can track all those things at once. So if you have a building, you have a bunch of these materials over time, you can actually understand the value of those materials. So I could geek out about it all day, but anyways, that's to say that Embodied Carbon Network is a great space to learn more about that. And then there are really neat tools. Delestre is one such example of a tool, and then there's also Buildings as Materials Banks, BAMB, which is out of the European Union. They have design guidelines. They have like methodologies and processes to follow for designing more circular and reusable buildings, et cetera, et cetera. And they also have a keen interest in embodied carbon. So highly recommend some of those resources. And I think we can include some links in the chat here.
I'm very confident that Passive House Canada will be doing more embodied carbon events like this within technical groups, within our social groups, because it's me that's putting them together, and it's big interest for me. So
yeah, I know that when I saw George was on looking at that Delestre site, that actual complex can actually be deconstructed. I think just with a screwdriver. Isn't that correct, George?
Sorry, which complex?
The complex that's featured in the website from Delestre in the Netherlands. There, I think that whole. If you
they've got
look
a
at
few
it,
there. They do have, like, they've worked with BAMB and others to think about, to just take the whole thing apart, right?
Yeah.
And so that's going to be just transformative. And I mean, of course, the City of Vancouver's leadership on embodied carbon policy at the development permit stage and rolling out in the building code over time as part of our climate emergency. If we're asking you to tell us how much embodied carbon is in your buildings, well, one of the ways you can reduce that is to bring more reusable materials in. Now, we've got there's some considerations around concrete that are really tough, because that's obviously going to be the largest that's the largest source of carbon by weight in the new building. But again, that's another incentive we're trying to offer to drive people towards reusable materials.
I have a quick question regarding concrete, actually. Have you guys heard of Carbon Cure?
Yeah. I have.
Have any of the concrete companies in Vancouver partnered with them as of yet?
Yes. I don't know which one. The two cement companies are Lafarge and Lehigh, and they both have various initiatives that they're working on with different companies, but I'm not sure which one is working with them.
Yeah, me neither. I'm not sure.
I think I know that Lafarge was talking with him, and I'm forgetting his name right now.
Rustum.
The Embodied Carbon Network.
Oh, okay. Well, there's the alternative fuels guy.
There a couple of months ago.
Okay.
I haven't seen anybody, with it logoed on their trucks yet, or haven't seen it on their websites yet. So I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see when it comes about.
Yeah, I do some work with concrete, and I'd be interested in using whoever's on board first.
In that Embodied Carbon Network, and the critical thought leader that is Anthony Pack, and he's kind of the guy that's running that show. He would have the best answers for that very quickly.
Also, you may want to talk to the Cement Association of Canada. Ken Karuska is the VP that manages BC, and he would know. And then you could probably get more of a holistic view as well of how to get into the industry. That helps.
I'm going to do a quick Passos Canada plug while I've got an audience, because I can. What I wanted to show quickly was, I know that I've always struggled with it, and I did it for the first time, and I've been part of Passos Canada for a while. But if you actually go and fill out the Stay Informed, which is the newsletter, so Colin, I'm looking at you on this one. If you fill this in properly, it actually does get you so that when we do regional communications or national communications, it will go to the right place. So I'm literally at passoscanada.com, the very front page, scrolling a little bit down. If you fill in that piece and subscribe, that's the best way to stay connected. That's where the regional letters go out from. I had to do it myself on Monday.
I think we're getting to the bottom of the hour here, so maybe if I can just, if people have any ideas for further explorations into this topic or other information they're looking to learn about, I think we're going to want to kind of round out here. But if you want to throw ideas in the chat, that would be great, and that can help Chris and myself and others think about how we can build more programming for you folks in the future to help you build your knowledge and ideally build your business in this space. So I'll sign off for myself and say thank you so much. From the VC's perspective, we continue to be really excited by the incredible work of our colleagues at the city who are building the policies that enable this, and all the incredible businesses. Chris, Cincy, Cassidy, you guys are doing awesome work, and we're really proud to, when we go abroad or when we talk to our colleagues around the country, we say, yeah, these folks do it here. They're already doing it, and I'm sure many of you in the audience are in that same category. So thank you for the work that you do. Thanks for letting me gab along here, and just looking forward to staying involved in this conversation moving forward. And thank you, Chris, for putting all this together and, like I said, letting me meander on.
Thanks, everyone. From Passos Canada, we appreciate you coming out. I'll post my email again, and in all seriousness, we are programming these events. So if anyone has any ideas or wants something, feel free to reach out to myself. And we're excited. We do have the next social, which will be May 19th. So it's next week, next Tuesday. It's going to be an evening one, so it's 6 to 8 p.m. We're trying out some new times. There will be an email about that. And it's going to be the introduction. It'll be a bit more passive house focused, and it's the introduction to 825 Pacific with Prudence and her crew. So it should be a pretty exciting viewing. We're trying to do a live broadcast from the BCIT High Performance Lab because everyone's familiar with that place. So what we're trying to do is bring it back to a little bit regional versus just this big national audience. So that is the thought. So May 19th. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for everybody for coming out.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Chris, Faisal, are we just